Hello everyone, and welcome to the first tutorial in this series on Unreal Engine Audio. This first tutorial will be walking you through getting started with Unreal, as well as some of the basics of working with the engine. To get you started, we are going to be looking at the Epic Games Launcher. Now, in order to download the Epic Games Launcher, you just have to type in Epic Games Launcher Download, and then click on the download link. This will take you to this page, and you can download it either for Windows or for Mac OS, depending on what computer you will be using. After it's downloaded, let's go ahead and open up the Epic Games Launcher. It is likely that you will have to create an Epic Games account in order to use the Epic Games Launcher. If you already have an Epic Games account, you can just log in with that and you'll be totally good to go. After you've logged in, you will be greeted with the Unreal Engine page. If this isn't what you see, you may need to click on the Unreal Engine tab in order to access this content. The first page that you'll be greeted with is the News page. This is where the most recent news about the Unreal Engine is uploaded, as well as having links to YouTube tutorials, Q&A, as well as forums for questions on the Unreal Engine. The next tab over is the Samples page. This has a lot of samples, games, levels, and much more that you can download to see how they're built. Most of these are for demonstration purposes, and they are a great way to see what potential the engine has to offer. The next tab is the Marketplace. This is where you can download all sorts of assets, textures, characters, and much more to use in your levels. While some of these are paid downloads, there are lots of free downloads available. The easiest way to find these free assets is under the Free tab that you can find right up here. You can also search for these projects if you know what you're looking for up here in the Search tab. Before we get to the Library tab, I wanted to briefly touch on the Twinmotion tab. Twinmotion is a 3D visualization tool that is popular for 360 video, panoramas, or architecture. Unreal Engine has an implementation of this software for demo use, but we will not be going into that during this tutorial series. Finally, we come to the Library tab. The Library tab is where you will have all of your assets for Unreal Engine use. Here at the top, you have your Engine Version tab. This allows you to choose what version of the engine you have installed on your system. If you ever want to download a newer or older version of the engine, you just click this yellow plus, select the engine version that you want, and then click Install. For this tutorial series, you will just want Unreal Engine 5 or higher. The next section is the My Projects section. This will have all of your projects that you have created in the engine. You can click on these to open or manage any of these projects. Then at the very bottom is the Vault. This will have all the assets or levels that you've downloaded from the Samples or Marketplace on the Epic Games Launcher. If you create any levels based on these assets, all you have to do is click the Create Project, and this will automatically add it to your projects. If the level was created in a different version of the engine than the one that you have, it will prompt you to create the level with a previous version, such as if I click on this one, or with a new version in my case. This may lose some functionality as not all engine versions are fully compatible, but it will try its best to accurately recreate the level. Now that we've talked about the Epic Games Launcher, let's actually open up the engine. Now, there are a few ways to open the engine. The first is to launch the engine from the Library tab by clicking this launch button right here. The second is that you could click the launch button at the top, which is available in any of the tabs. If you have multiple versions, click the triangle in order to see which one you want to launch. Or you can click to create a shortcut. In order to do this, you click this down tab here and click Create Shortcut, which will create a shortcut on your desktop. This is the easiest if you want to open up the engine without dealing with the Epic Games Launcher. So let's go ahead and launch. Once you have the engine opened, you will be greeted with the Unreal Project Browser. The first page you'll be greeted with is the Recent Project page. This will have all the projects that you have been working on within the engine. But for this part of the tutorial, our goal is to create a new game. So in order to do this, I'm going to click on the Games tab in order to see our options. You can also click the other tabs, which have other uses for the engine, but for this tutorial, we'll be focusing on the games. The next screen will allow you to choose from built-in templates to create your game. All of these can be quite helpful if you have a particular game in mind, as it automatically puts functionality and assets into your game. But we will be choosing a blank project. Before we create the project, we need to set some default settings. The first is choosing if the project is Blueprint or C++. We will be choosing Blueprint because we will not be using C++ until later in this tutorial series. The second is the target platform. You have an option between desktop or mobile. Mobile is primarily for virtual reality and AR, so we will be creating a desktop app. The quality preset, we will be setting maximum. Scalable would be, again, using it for AR or VR. We will click Starter Content in order to have some of the basic assets in our level. And then we will disable ray tracing because it is pretty computationally expensive. The next thing we need to do is choose where our project is saved. I have mine in my Documents folder where I keep all my projects, but you can put these wherever you want as long as you remember where they're located. Finally, let's name this project. I'm going to name this Beginner. And then just click Create and wait for the engine to load. And now we are in the Unreal Editor. What we will be going over are the different parts of the editor. What you see when you first create a level is the default setting of the editor. While I personally like this layout, it may not work for everyone. So if you want to rearrange the editor, all you need to do is click on the tab you want to move and slide it to another area. It has some locking presets that if you put it in that spot, it'll move it there. So you can create this and make it look exactly how you want. If you ever accidentally close one of the tabs, just like that, go up to the Window tab and click on the name of the section that you closed. In my case, it was the outliner. While it may seem like there are a ton of things to look at in the editor, it is not as complex as you think. The beautiful aspect of the editor is that by hovering over an item, it gives you a description of the functionality as well as any keyboard shortcuts that are available for use. If you ever want to see more information on it, you can hold Ctrl-Alt or Command-Alt for Mac while hovering over to see a more detailed description if it's available. To get us started with the different sections, let's take a look at the top of the editor, which is known as the toolbar. At the top, you can see the name of the level, which in this case is Minimal Default. Below that is our Save button in order to save our work within the level. To the right of that is our Modes tab. This allows you to choose what selection mode you have within the level. We will primarily be using the Select mode for audio, but if you want to know more, you can hover over the other options to see more or find the documentation to go along with it online. The next tab is the Place Actors tab. This corresponds to this tab down here, also by the same name, and this is included in case you don't want to have your Place Actors within the Unreal Editor. We'll be going over the Place Actors functionality a little bit later. Next over are the Blueprint and Level Sequencer tabs, which we will be covering in later tutorials. The Platforms tab is more important for working with VR and AR, so we will not be covering that for this tutorial. Then over on the far right is our Project Settings tab. As you probably guessed, this allows you to alter some of your project settings within your level. We won't be using this much, but just know that you can change general settings of your level here. Finally, we have the Simulation tab. This allows you to test out your level and see how everything works together. We'll be covering this in more detail when we get to the viewport. The next section we will be going over is the Outliner. What this tab does is it allows you to manage and view every asset that is currently being used in your level. To view the asset, all that you have to do is click on it, and it highlights it within the viewport. You can also select the same asset, say if I wanted to select this chair, and it will then select the corresponding asset within the outliner as well. If you know what asset you're looking for, you can search for it in the search bar. Say if I wanted to look for the floor, and then it automatically sorts everything that then contains the floor, including prior folders. Another cool aspect of the outliner is that if you double-click on an asset, it automatically takes you to that item within the viewport. This can be quite useful, especially when we start working with larger maps. As can be seen here, you can also organize your level into folders. All you have to do is click on the assets that you want to group, including folders, then just click this folder button up here at the top in order to create a new folder containing everything that you had highlighted. You can also drag and drop anything into these folders if you just want to move it around more visually. If you want to get rid of a folder, just highlight it, press delete on your keyboard, and it gets rid of that folder for you. Another thing that you can do is hide particular items in your level. Say that I don't want to see the chairs in my level. All I would need to do is click this eyeball right here, and that hides whatever static meshes that I don't want to see within my level. The same thing can then be accomplished by clicking on the folder. So if I click on this, it brings all of the static meshes back into the level. Next up, we have the Details panel. Now, as you might notice, this is obviously empty at the current moment. The only time that it populates is when I select an actor within the level, such as a chair. This then displays the properties of the asset in question. Since every item in the game has different properties, the values in the Details panel will vary based on what I have selected. We will be using the Details panel later in this series, so make sure to get familiar with what you can find for different assets. Right next to the Details panel is the World Settings panel. This tab has much deeper gameplay mechanics than we will be getting into in this tutorial series, but we may reference it from time to time. So, for now, just know that this is where you can find it. If we go over to the far left side of the editor, we find the Place Actors tab. This tab allows you to, you guessed it, place actors in your level. Now, actors can be anything from characters to trigger boxes to audio components. And while we will be spending most of our time creating distinct actors in our content drawer, if you need a quick item in your level, it is very easy to click and drag it into your level, like so. If you then don't want that in your level, you can either do Ctrl or Command Z, or you can just press Delete while having it selected within the level. If you ever see this prompt come up while working within the Unreal Engine, all that means is that something was added within your level that doesn't have the proper lighting integrated within the level. In order to do that, all you need to do is go to Build, and then do Build Lighting Only. Once that's done, you will be good to go. As far as the content drawer goes, where we can find that is down here in the bottom left of the editor. This is where you can find all of the assets available within your level. If we had started with a totally blank project, there would be nothing to see in this content drawer. However, since we chose the starter content, we have some content to work with. If we open up the starter content folder, we can see the different things that we have to work with. Let's open up the architecture folder in order to see what that has to offer. As you can see, we have a bunch of items to work with. If we hover over one of these, we can see the details of it. In this case, we are working with a static mesh, which are basically the visual skins of different actors within your level. Much like the Place Actors tab, if we want to put these actors in the level, we just have to drag and drop them. If we wanted to delete them, we can either click on them within the level, and then select Delete, as I mentioned before, or you can right-click, and then go to Edit, Delete. Within the content drawer, you can always create new folders and reorganize items to fit your needs, such as if you were to right-click and click New Folder. Along with this, you can import assets into your level from your computer at any time, either by right-clicking and clicking Import to whatever folder you're in, or you can drag and drop assets directly into your folder. There are lots of other kinds of actors available in the starter content, including blueprints, audio, etc., and we will be going over a lot of these later in the tutorial series. However, I highly recommend clicking through and opening up the different assets available to see what sorts of things the engine has to offer. Last but certainly not least, we have the viewport. The viewport is where we are going to be spending a lot of our time in this tutorial series. It is both where you can move and change things within your level, as well as where you can simulate it and try it out for yourself. The first thing we're going to be talking about is moving around within the viewport, and there are multiple ways to do this. There is right-click movement, left-click movement, and both-click movement. Right-click movement, as you can guess, is done by right-clicking and holding. It allows you to look around in every direction, but doesn't allow you to move positions. Your position is stagnant, but you're not restricted to looking in any particular direction, even directly over yourself. Left-click movement allows you to move forwards and backwards by sliding the mouse, as well as allowing you to look side to side. However, you are not able to move up or down using the left-click method and are stuck in the horizontal plane. Then there's clicking with both the left and right buttons. This can also be accomplished by clicking the scroll button on your mouse if your mouse has one of those. This, much like the left-click movement, restricts you to a single plane, in this case the vertical plane, so you can move up, down, and side to side, but you can't turn around at all. All of these movement options can be paired with the WASD keys as well as the Q and E keys. While clicking and holding with any of these options, you can move forward, backward, left, and right using the WASD, and then move down and up using Q and E respectively. Finally, you can use the scroll button on your mouse to zoom in and out within the level. My personal favorite movement method is to use WASD to move around, and the right click to look around while doing this. I then pair this with clicking both left and right to move up and down when needed if I need minute adjustments. However, you can pick whatever movement type feels best to you. The last thing I will mention in regards to movement is the camera speed. If we look up at the top right corner of the viewport, we can see the camera icon. If we click on this, this gives us the option to either change the speed by a single value. The smaller the number, the slower the camera. And this has to do with when you're moving around with like WASD. As you can see, I'm moving around much slower now. But if you only want to adjust a little bit, you can move this, or you can adjust it up by a scalar value, say 1.5. This will move you slightly faster around the viewport, which will be very helpful when we work with bigger levels. If we look at the other parts of the top of the viewport, we can see some of the viewport options. The first button allows you to change different settings of the viewport. We won't be using this much, but if you want to see more details, just hover over the options and use the Control-Alt to see more details. Next is our Perspective tab, which allows you to change what perspective you are viewing the level from. The most commonly used one will be the perspective setting, which we've been in currently, but we can also have the option to see the level from the top, side, or below the level. This can be useful for seeing your project from a different perspective. Also, if you ever need to find distances within your level, if you go to the top view and then click and drag with the scroll button, it shows you the distances in centimeters. When clicking in the different perspectives, you may notice that the level looks a lot different. That's because the engine defaults to a different view type when these perspective modes are used. In this case, it defaults to wireframe, and all of these can be changed within this tab that is right next to the Perspectives tab. This determines how you see your level in order to see particular aspects of your game. Seeing if I could do lit would give us a different view than if I were to choose player collision. These just highlight different parts of your game, but for us, we are going to mainly be sticking with lit. Next up is the Show tab. This allows you to hide or show entire groups of items and aspects within your level. Since we are dealing with audio, we won't be going over many of these, but feel free to check them out on your own. Now that we've gone over some of the viewport settings, let's get into interacting with our level. The settings that determine how we interact with the level are in the upper right-hand corner of our viewport. The first section determines what options we get when we click on any item in the game. The first option is the Select mode. This allows you to only select items within your level and not interact with them. This can be useful when you don't want to disturb your level or accidentally move something a little bit when working through the level. The next few options allow you to interact with the objects in the level. These are the Translate, Rotation, and Scale options. Every object in your level has a location, rotation, and scale component to it. You can change these by either typing or sliding them in the Details panel. Say if I were to slide this, you can see it translates along the x-axis. Or you can actually change them within the viewport. And in order to change these values, you need to have that selection mode selected. In order to change between these, you can either click on them within the top right, or you can use the Q, W, E, and R respectively in order to switch between those. You'll notice that when I have one of the three interactable options selected, there is now a set of axes that appear at the center of the object. These correspond to the X, Y, and Z directions as the object can be seen in the Details panel. This is true for both Translate, Rotate, and Scale. If we want to move the object around the level, select Translate or press W. Depending on what part of the axes you click on, you'll move the object in that direction. If you only select one of the axes, you'll only be able to move it along that axis, whatever it may be. If you select one of these right-angle multicolored ones, this will allow you to move in two directions, such as the horizontal plane or the vertical plane. Then finally, if you click on the white part, that allows you to move in all three directions. This is most helpful when you're working with scaling, as if you select the white, it would allow you to change all of the values at the same time, keeping the proportions of the item. Rotation is slightly different, as it only lets you rotate in one of the directions at a time, which in my opinion makes pretty good sense. One thing you may have noticed as I've been changing this object is that it seems to snap to particular directions. It's not moving very smoothly. This is due to the snapping feature present in the 3 transformation types. If we go back to the top of the viewport, we can see these blue highlighted areas. If these are selected, this means that our object will snap to the resolution that we have selected to the right of it. For translation, this is set to 10 centimeters, rotation 10 degrees, and scale is 0.25% of the original size. We can change this resolution by clicking on it and changing the number. For the translation, the resolution corresponds to the grid that you can see in the level. So the smaller the division that I make, the more detailed the graph gets. And then the bigger I make them, the wider the graph gets. This is nice because it gives you a visual representation of exactly how you're moving your object. In order to turn off snapping, just click on the highlighted area and you will now be able to move the object smoothly without having to worry about any sorts of snapping. The last 2 sections of the transform options are the orientation and the snapping. Orientation mainly has to do with the rotation of the object. If you've noticed before, whenever I rotate the object, if I go back to translation, it stays oriented to the level's orientation, in this case, world orientation, which we have selected up here. But if I were to change to object or local orientation, you can now see that the axes line up with the object, not the world. This can be helpful if you're creating a game where relative movement is more important than world movement, such as in flying games. Snapping has to do with how objects behave when moving around the level. If I have snapping off, what that means is that as I move it around, it'll kind of phase through the different objects unless we have some sort of condition where that's not allowed. But if I were to choose surface snapping, that means that as I move the object around the level, it will snap to the surface of whatever it's going over, which will help keep the relative position of these objects. One thing you'll notice is that as I'm moving around, it adjusts itself to the angle of whatever it's on. This can be very helpful, but you can also turn that off here by unselecting the rotate to surface normal. This will then just make it straight up and down no matter where it is. There are a few more tips and tricks for working with objects in the viewport that I would like to share. First, with translating, there are a few keys that you can use at the same time as moving to do other functionality. The first one is if you hold Alt or Option while moving, it actually duplicates your object. If you hold Shift while moving, it moves your camera along with the object. And holding Control allows you to move your object faster than if you don't have it selected. Next, there is the Pilot feature. If you right-click on an object like this chair, you can see this option down here for Pilot, Chair, or whatever object you're on. If you click on that, this allows you to actually pilot your object just like you would moving around the viewport, which can be very helpful for having exact positioning or for moving it long distances around your level. Then to exit, just click up here to the escape, and you will be good to go. Finally, if you want to snap your object to whatever surface it is above, just press the end on your keyboard to do that. In this case, the collision was too close to the table. Let's give it a scoop back and press end again. One last thing within the viewport is up here, if you see these viewport restores, what this means is if you click on it, it gives you different options that you can set for your viewport. So in this case, it has the top view, side view, and front view. Or in this case, the back view. You can change these, alter what type they are, whether it's wireframe, unlit, whatever you want. But this just allows you to easily switch between different views with a click of a button. Finally, let's get into simulating your level. As we mentioned before, this part of the toolbar allows you to simulate the game. You can also press Alt-P in order to start playing within the viewport. In order to gain control of the game, just click into the viewport. As you can see up in the top left, if you want to regain mouse control, you can just press Shift F1 in case you ever want to click on things, move things, anything like that. Then just click back in the viewport to regain control. Since we don't have any movement controls programmed, the game defaults to the basic movement mechanics. In this case, that's moving with the WASD, QE, and looking with the mouse. To exit the simulation, you can either regain mouse control and click the stop button, or if you're clicked in the viewport, you can just click escape. One thing to note is that when I press play, it automatically moves me to wherever the player start is, no matter where I am in the level. If you want to start in a different location, especially when testing out your game, you can either right-click in the level and click play from here, or you can change the settings up here and make it so that you do the current camera position rather than the default player's start. So then when you press play, you'll start from that same camera position. This brings us to the end of the Unreal Basics tutorial. I hope you found this helpful as you begin your journey into the Unreal Engine. My recommendation would be to take some of the objects in the content drawer and practice manipulating them in the level. Try making a house using the architecture objects in the content drawer and practice manipulating them within the level. Check out the blueprints, see what they do. And if you need some inspiration or just want to explore the level more, go down to the Maps folder and click on the Starter map. It may prompt you to save your items, that's totally fine. Then this map gives you a better demonstration of all of the different features within your starter content, including sound and different blueprints. So if I were to press play, as you can see, it gives you lots of things to view and experiment with. Maybe a good challenge would be to try to recreate this entire space in the other level. That would be a very fun challenge to do, and it would cause you to mess around with different aspects of your level. Have some fun messing around with the engine, and I will see you in the next tutorial.